Look at the 6'2" man in your office. He's never been late, never missed a deadline, and never complained. He did everything right. Yet, he still can't afford to retire. You might ask, where did he fail? But the real question is, what if he didn't fail? What if he's exactly where the system designed him to be? See, school didn't teach you how to be free, it taught you how to be predictable. Today, we're breaking the script they forced you to follow. Here is the truth they don't want you to learn. You were born into a world where the architecture was already finished. The streets were paved, the buildings were raised, and the rules, especially the rules, were already carved in stone long before you took your first breath. Most people spend their entire lives trying to win a game they didn't realize was rigged from the start. They follow the manual, they wait their turn, and they assume that if they just play by the rules will eventually take care of them. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli stood in the halls of power in Florence, not as a scholar or a dreamer, but as a witness. He didn't look at the world as it should be. He looked at it as it actually was. He saw that behind every great civilization, behind every stable society, there is an invisible divide that never changes, regardless of the century. On one side of that line are the architects, the ones who write the scripts, define the values, and set the boundaries. On the other side are the believers. These are the people who wake up every morning convinced that the system was designed to protect them, to nourish them, and to provide them with a path to success. The believers view the law as a shield. The architects view it as a tool. The system doesn't need to use force to keep you in line. It doesn't need to scream or threaten. In fact, it prefers to be silent. It functions through a series of invisible pressures that feel like common sense. It teaches you that doing the right thing means staying in your lane. It teaches you that discipline means showing up to build someone else's dream while your own withers in the background. It doesn't want to break your will, it just wants to occupy your time until you're too tired to ask why. Consider this. The most loyal person in any organization is almost always the one kept in the same place the longest. We are raised to believe that loyalty is a virtue that inevitably leads to growth and reward. But within the cold mechanics of power, loyalty is often just a signal of stability. If you are the person who never leaves, who never complains, and who can always be counted on to handle the weight, you have become far too valuable to move. You aren't being rewarded for your service. You are being anchored by it. The system doesn't need to chain you to the floor, it just needs to make sure you are exactly where it needs you to be, serving a purpose you didn't choose, for a reward that remains forever out of reach. This is the fatigue that sleep cannot cure. It is the weight of being useful to everyone except yourself. The system doesn't need to steal your life. It just needs to teach you how to surrender it willingly, 1 year at a time, in the name of being a good and reliable person. The question you have to ask yourself isn't whether the system is fair. The question is, which side of the line are you on? Are you the one holding the pen, or are you just the ink being used to write someone else's story? You have spent your life being told that the rules are there for your safety. Machiavelli would tell you that they are there for your predictability, because a predictable person is easy to manage, easy to place, and even easier to replace. Look at the path you are walking. If it was laid out for you by someone else, don't be surprised when it leads exactly where they want you to go. Value is a ghost. It isn't found in the object itself, but in the panic that follows the thought of losing it. Most people believe scarcity is an economic reality, that there simply isn't enough to go around. They are wrong. Scarcity is a psychological weapon. The elite don't control the supply, they control your fear of running out. The human brain is still wired for primitive survival. It doesn't respond to logic, it responds to signals. When a signal of depletion is sent, rational thought ends and desperation begins. This is why you see crowds fighting over a piece of plastic just because it's labeled limited edition. The wealthy know that if you give the world everything, the world will give you nothing in return. To keep the price high, they keep the shelf empty, not because they have to, but because they want you to feel the weight of the void. But this isn't just about luxury goods or digital assets. This principle applies to the most valuable resource you own, yourself. Power is never found in the center of the room, shouting for attention. It is found in the silence of the one who isn't there. Machiavelli understood that a leader who is too visible, too reachable, and too talkative eventually becomes common. And when you are common, you are easily ignored. The elite understand that their presence is a finite resource. They don't attend every meeting. They don't answer every call. They don't offer their opinion to anyone who asks. They dose their existence with surgical precision. They understand that every time they appear, they are spending their value. Every time they speak, they are thinning their influence. They create a hidden playbook by making themselves the rarest thing in the room. Now, look at your own life. You have been taught that being available is a virtue. You respond to messages in seconds. You say yes to every invitation. You are always there, always ready, always reachable. You think you are being helpful. You think you are being reliable. But in the cold mechanics of power, you aren't being reliable, you are being cheap. Availability kills value. It is a fundamental law of human nature. If you are always accessible, you become part of the background noise. You become a commodity, and commodities are always traded at the lowest possible price. By being constantly available, you are self-depreciating your own life. The system has convinced you that your worth is measured by how much you give. While the architects grow powerful by exactly how much they withhold, they have weaponized your own desire against you, making you chase what is rare while you offer yourself up as common. Ask yourself, are you truly valuable, or are you just easy to find? The moment you become predictable, you become worthless. Power doesn't belong to the one who does the most. It belongs to the one whose absence would be felt the most. From this point on, every time you say yes when you should have been silent, you are paying a tax on your own significance. What follows is the realization that the world doesn't reward those who are always there. It rewards those who know how to disappear. Imagine a Monday morning like any other. 8:58 a.m. You open your laptop, ready to be productive, ready to be the reliable person the world expects you to be. But there's an email at the top of your inbox. No subject line, just a link to a private meeting with a manager you've never spoken to. In less than 15 minutes, the entire financial structure of your life, the house you live in, the car you drive, the future you've promised your children is erased by a stranger's mouse click. Most people see this as a tragedy of the modern economy. Machiavelli would see it as a catastrophic error in strategy. In the ancient world, a city with only one gate was a city waiting to be conquered. If the enemy controlled that single point of entry, they controlled the food, the water, and the very lives of everyone inside. Today, the battlefield has changed, but the mechanics of power remain identical. Your single paycheck is that gate. The system has spent years convincing you that focus and specialization are the keys to a respectable life. But in the cold language of power, specialization is just another word for dependency. When you have only one source of income, you don't have a career. You have a master, and that master knows it. They know that because you are dependent on that single lifeline, you will swallow the disrespect. They know you will stay late without being asked, and that you will bite your tongue when you see something wrong. You will become the obedient person we spoke of not because you are inherently virtuous, but because you are strategically compromised. Your loyalty is not an act of love. It is a survival mechanism. Your master doesn't need to use force to keep you in line. They just need to remind you, silently and constantly, that the gate can be closed at any second. This is why the elite never rely on a single pillar. They understand that power is found in redundancy. To them, diversifying their income is not about greed or the pursuit of luxury. It is about building a fortress where no single attack can bring the walls down. It is a defensive posture designed to ensure that no one person, no one company, and no one algorithm has the power to end their financial existence. Every new source of income you build, no matter how small, is more than just money. It is a vote for your own sovereignty. It is a brick in your wall. When you have two sources of income, the master's voice becomes a little quieter. When you have 5, the master disappears entirely. At that point, you aren't working for survival. You are working for impact. The man with 1 income has 1 master. The man with many has none. The system wants you to believe that wanting more is a sign of greed. It wants you to stay loyal to the gate that feeds you. But true loyalty cannot exist where there is no freedom to leave. If you cannot walk away from the table, you aren't a guest, you're the meal. What follows is the realization that building multiple streams of income isn't a hobby. It is the only way to regain your humanity. Because until you control your exits, you will never truly control your life. In the 15th century, Machiavelli understood that to control the state, you had to control the narrative inside the court. He placed his people in the councils of Florence, not just to change the laws, but to change what the prince believed to be true. Because when you control what a man sees, you control what he decides. If Machiavelli were alive in 2025, he wouldn't care about court councils or political parties. He would buy an algorithm. He wouldn't try to tell you what to think. He would simply design the environment where you find it impossible to think of anything else. We live in an age where the battlefield has moved from the physical world to the 5 inches of glass in your pocket. You wake up, you scroll, and you believe you are making choices. You think you are consuming information. But in the architecture of the modern world, you aren't the consumer. You are the product being shaped. The digital platforms you use every day are not neutral tools. They are the most sophisticated persuasion machines ever built. They aren't designed to make you smarter, wealthier, or more free. They are designed for one thing: engagement. And engagement is a polite word for obsession. The architects of these systems have realized that truth is boring, but conflict is addictive. Clarity is quiet, but outrage is loud. So the algorithm feeds you a reality that is specifically engineered to keep you looking, keep you swiping, and keep you reacting. This isn't a conspiracy. It's mechanics. Every time you interact with a screen, you are feeding a feedback loop that learns your fears, your desires, and your insecurities better than you know them yourself. It doesn't need to force a belief on you. It just needs to surround you with so much of one perspective that any other perspective starts to look like madness. It defines what is normal. It defines what is attainable. It defines who your enemies are and what you should be afraid of today. By controlling the flow of information, the system controls your perception of reality. And once your reality is framed, your behavior becomes perfectly predictable. Machiavelli warned that the easiest way to lead a population is to make them believe that your will is actually their own. In the algorithmic age, this has reached its peak. You think you're choosing your political stance, your lifestyle, and your financial goals. But look closer. Are those goals truly yours, or were they whispered into your ear by 1,000 15-second clips? Are you angry because you saw an injustice, or because a line of code calculated that anger would keep you on the app for 10 more minutes? Information is the invisible hand that moves the world. Those who control the filters control the truth, and those who control the truth control the people who believe in it. The most dangerous form of control is the one that feels like freedom. You sit on your couch, swiping through an endless stream of content, feeling like you are exploring the world. In reality, you are walking through a labyrinth where every turn has been predetermined by someone who benefits from your confusion. So, ask yourself the only question that matters before you click the next link. This information I am about to swallow, does it serve my purpose, or does it serve the person who designed the feed? Because if you aren't paying for the map, you aren't the traveler. You are the cargo. What follows is the realization that your attention is the only thing truly yours, and it is the one thing everyone else is trying to steal. Your reality isn't what is happening. It's what you're being told is happening. And once you see the bars of the digital cage, the next phase is learning how to walk through them. Have you ever noticed a strange habit banks have? If you want to buy a house, they will gladly lend you hundreds of thousands of dollars. They will practically beg you to take it. But if you walk into that same bank and ask for that same amount of money to buy stocks, they will laugh you out of the building. Why? It isn't because the house is safer. It's because the bank understands the mechanics of time and profit better than you do. They aren't helping you buy a home. They are securing a 30-year stream of interest backed by your future labor. They are using your life to build their wealth, and they've convinced you to be grateful for the opportunity. This brings us to the billionaire's greatest secret. It isn't about how they make money. It's about whose money they use. The common man is taught that debt is a burden, a chain, a sign of living beyond your means. But for the architect of power, debt is a lever. Machiavelli understood that a prince who relies solely on his own treasury is a prince who will eventually run dry. Real power comes from the ability to move mountains using someone else's strength. This is the principle of OPR, other people's resources. The wealthy do not grow by saving their pennies. They grow by using yours. They borrow from the bank at a low rate to invest in a business that yields a high return. They keep the profit. They keep the control, and they pay the bank back with money that is worth less due to inflation. This isn't a scam, it is financial architecture. While you are taught to save, they are taught to leverage. You are building a sandcastle with your own 2 hands. They are building a fortress with 1,000 hands they don't even have to own. But this principle goes far deeper than capital. The most valuable resource in the world isn't money, it's effort. Look at the giants of the modern age. The social networks, the digital marketplaces, the platforms you scroll through every single day. Do they produce the content? Do they write the articles or film the videos? No, they don't have to. They simply build the playground. They've designed a system where millions of people are happy to work for hours every day, producing value for free, just for the dopamine hit of being seen. The system doesn't need to hire you. It just needs to convince you that your creativity is your reward, while it quietly harvests the data, the attention, and the profit. And then, there is the final layer, risk. The legal structures of the world were built with a very specific asymmetry. When the gamble pays off, the profit flows into a private vault. But when the gamble fails, the risk is socialized. It is spread across thousands of employees, millions of taxpayers, and entire nations. The architect remains dry while the crew drowns with the ship. This is the ultimate form of power, the ability to enjoy the reward without ever being vulnerable to the loss. This sounds cold. It sounds like manipulation, and in many ways it is. But the most important thing you will hear today is this. The art of power is convincing others that by serving you, they are serving themselves. It is making the employee feel loyal while his time is being sold. It is making the consumer feel unique while his preferences are being programmed. It is making the dependent feel secure while his gate is being locked. You aren't learning this so you can go out and exploit the world. You are learning this because the only way to avoid being a pawn is to finally see the board. If you cannot identify whose resources are being used to build the empire you see in front of you, chances are the resources are yours. You have been taught that self-reliance is the highest virtue. Machiavelli would tell you that self-reliance is the path to exhaustion. What follows is the realization that no one ever achieved true freedom by selling their own time. They achieved it by owning the systems that use the time of others. If you don't learn how to use the lever, you will spend your life being the one who is pushed. The world is obsessed with the outcome, but the outcome is the least important part of the equation. Look at the lottery winner, a person who receives the harvest without ever planting the seeds. Statistically, most of them end up bankrupt, broken, and more miserable than the day they bought the ticket. This isn't a coincidence of fate. It is a mechanism of the mind. The human brain is not naturally designed for abundance. It is designed for equilibrium. It has a psychological baseline, a financial thermostat, that it considers safe. For most, that temperature is set to struggle. When a sudden influx of wealth enters their life, it doesn't create peace. It creates a massive internal friction. The brain doesn't see opportunity. It sees a violation of its own identity. Neuroscience tells us that our minds crave homeostasis, just as your body sweats to cool down when it gets too hot. Your mind will subconsciously trigger self-sabotaging behaviors when your external reality exceeds your internal self-worth. It starts with impulsive treats, then reckless investments, and finally, a total collapse of the discipline that was never truly there to begin with. The brain is effectively burning down the palace because it doesn't recognize the person living inside. It is desperately trying to return you to the level of struggle you find familiar. It destroys the wealth to save the identity. This is the fundamental difference between the one who inherits and the one who builds. The self-made architect builds the fortress before the palace. The fortress isn't made of stone. It is made of thousands of small, invisible decisions. Every time they chose delayed gratification over an instant hit of dopamine, they were recalibrating their financial thermostat. Every time they prioritized power over luxury, they were hardening their identity. By the time the wealth arrives, it doesn't cause friction because the internal structure is already strong enough to hold it. They were already a king in their mind long before the first coin reached their hand. Machiavelli observed that many seek the ornaments of power without first securing the foundations. They want the title, the status, and the silk. But true power is a psychological state. It is the ability to maintain clarity while everyone else is blinded by their own desires. If you haven't trained your mind to govern $100, $1 million will only serve to highlight your weaknesses. It will magnify your flaws until they crush you. Luxury is a weapon when used by the powerful, but it is a trap for the weak. The elite understand that the palace is built last. They focus on the fortress, the systems, the assets, and the mindset that ensure the wealth can never leave. They don't just possess their assets. They are the kind of people who could possess them. You cannot keep what you haven't become. If your identity is still that of the obedient servant or the struggling victim, any wealth that comes your way will be temporary. It will slip through your fingers like water. The system knows this. It is happy to give you a win every now and then, because it knows your brain will return that money to the architects within a year. The real work isn't in the pursuit of the money. It is in the ruthless expansion of your own identity. You must become the person who is worthy of the life you want before that life can ever manifest. What follows is a truth that most people will spend their lives running from. The external world is nothing more than a mirror of your internal fortress. If the fortress is weak, no amount of luxury can protect you. You have to decide. Are you building a temporary palace for your ego or an indestructible fortress for your mind? The palace is for show. The fortress is for power. The next phase is realizing that you can only hold as much as your character can carry. There is a silent question that often arises at this stage. It is the moral wall that the system builds to keep the believers from ever looking behind the curtain. The question is whether understanding the mechanics of power, the leverage, the scarcity, the manipulation of information somehow stains the soul, whether one can see the board clearly and still remain a good person. We are raised to believe that ignorance is a form of innocence. We are taught that if we do not look at the darkness, we remain pure. But in the cold mechanics of reality, ignorance is not innocence, it is vulnerability. The system loves a good person who is blind, because a blind person is the easiest to lead. They are the ones who follow the rules not out of conviction, but because they don't know any other way to exist. Machiavelli did not write his observations to turn good men into monsters. He wrote them to prevent good men from being destroyed by monsters. Consider the physician. A doctor must understand exactly how a toxin destroys the human heart. They must study the poison, the dosage, and the precise moment the body surrenders. Does this knowledge make them a murderer? No. It makes them the only person capable of designing the cure. To save a life, one must understand how a life is taken. To protect a fortune, one must understand how a fortune is drained. To preserve freedom, one must understand exactly how the cage is built. There is no virtue in a choice that was never yours to make. True morality does not exist in the absence of power. It exists in the presence of it. If you are good only because you are too weak to be anything else, that is not virtue, that is necessity. Real character is what happens when you have the lever in your hand. when you understand the algorithm, and when you see the path to exploitation, but you choose a different destination. Machiavelli does not teach us to be cruel. He teaches us to be awake. He observed that the most virtuous were often the ones who suffered the most not because of their goodness, but because of their blindness. They mistook their lack of options for a presence of character. They called their inability to fight peace, and their fear of the world morality. They were not good. They were simply predictable. Understanding the mechanics of the world does not make you a tool of the system. It makes you a sovereign. It allows you to offer your loyalty instead of having it harvested. It allows you to choose your master instead of being born into one. It transforms you from a victim of circumstance into an architect of reality. The system wants you to feel guilty for even watching this. It wants you to retreat back into the comfort of being a believer. It wants you to keep your eyes closed so it can keep its hands in your pockets. But the greatest deception ever pulled was convincing the masses that poverty is a sign of purity and that power is a sign of sin. The danger is not in knowing the rules of the game. The danger is not knowing and calling your ignorance virtue, because a man who does not know he is in a cage will never try to escape. And a man who calls his cage home has already surrendered the only thing that makes him human. What follows is the final realization that the truth doesn't change who you are, it only reveals what you were always meant to be. If you lose a bar of gold, you can work harder and buy another. If your health fails, you can rest, recover, and heal. But your 38th year, your 20s, the afternoon you just spent waiting for the perfect moment, there is no bank in the world, no matter how much interest you offer, that can return a single second once it has slipped away. We are raised to believe that patience is a virtue. We are told that good things come to those who wait. But in the cold mechanics of power, patience is often just a polite word for hesitation. And hesitation is the most expensive tax you will ever pay. Every time you tell yourself it's not the right time, or I'll start when I'm ready, you aren't just pausing. You are signing a contract. It is a high-interest loan you are taking out against your future self, a debt where the collateral is your own life. The system loves it when you wait. It encourages your discipline to stay in your lane and your loyalty to wait for your turn. Why? Because as long as you are waiting, you are predictable. As long as you are waiting, your time belongs to the architects, not to you. There is a glitch in the human brain. We are wired to obsess over the price of a coffee or the cost of a car, yet we are completely blind to the cost of a year wasted. We undervalue the future because it hasn't arrived yet, and we overvalue the comfort of today because we can feel it. This is the invisible trap. By the time the bill comes due, by the time you realize the true cost of those years spent in a cubicle, following rules that weren't written for you, the interest has already swallowed the principal. You wake up at 60 and realize you've been paying for a lifestyle you never actually lived. The elite understand a math that the masses never learn. They don't wait for certainty, because certainty is an illusion designed to keep you paralyzed. They don't wait for the conditions to be perfect. They build their systems, they launch their leverage, and they take their risks while the world is still messy. Why? Because they know that a system built today is a machine that manufactures freedom tomorrow. Every year they wait is another year they are forced to trade their own finite hours for someone else's profit. They understand that time is the only currency that even power cannot reproduce. They can print more money. They can manufacture more products. They can even buy more influence. But even the most powerful architect on earth cannot buy back the minute that just passed. This is the ultimate equalizer. The difference between those who own the world and those who are owned by it comes down to a single realization: that your time is a non-renewable resource. You have been taught to be a good and reliable person, which usually means being someone who waits for permission. Machiavelli would tell you that fortune favors the bold, but it bows to the prepared. And preparation doesn't mean waiting for the right time. It means understanding that the clock is always ticking, and it is always counting down. Stop looking at the price tag of the things you want. Start looking at the price tag of the years you are giving away to stay where you are. Every day you spend living someone else's script is a day you've effectively deleted from your own life. The system doesn't need to steal your life all at once. It's happy to take it one Monday morning at a time. What follows is the hardest truth of all. You can get the money back. You can get the status back. You can even get the reputation back. But you will never, ever get this version of yourself back. The payment has been made. The contract is in effect. The only question left is how much more of yourself you are willing to spend before you finally decide to walk away from the table. You have seen the map now. The invisible rules, the architectural traps, and the levers of power that move while you sleep have been laid bare. Most people will finish this video and go back to their lives. They will treat this information as entertainment, a brief spark of curiosity, before returning to the warm, suffocating comfort of the script. They will choose to believe that tomorrow will be different, without changing a single variable in the equation of their existence. There are only two kinds of people watching this right now. There are those who will choose to wake up, and those who will choose to go back to sleep. There is no middle ground. There is no waiting for the right time. You either decide to become the architect of your own reality, or you accept your position as a brick in someone else's wall. One path leads to clarity, which is often cold and lonely. The other leads to comfort, which is usually a slow death disguised as stability. Machiavelli spent his entire life in the shadows of palaces, watching men rise and fall. He saw brilliant men destroyed by their own loyalty, and mediocre men crowned because they understood the mechanics of the moment. He didn't judge them for their choices. He never looked at the masses with contempt. He simply noted a universal truth that hasn't changed in 500 years. Most people would rather be comfortably wrong than uncomfortably right. They would rather follow a leader they know is lying than face the terrifying silence of their own freedom. You are no longer a victim of a system you don't understand. You are now something far more dangerous to the architects. You are informed. You have been shown the levers. You have been given the playbook. The system has spent your entire life teaching you to be obedient, to be predictable, and to be small. It has taught you that discipline is a virtue of the follower, not the leader. But that education ended the moment this video started. Fortune favors the bold, everyone knows that. But Machiavelli knew something deeper. He understood that fortune is a fickle mistress that can be mastered only by those who refuse to be surprised. He noted, "Fortune favors the bold, but it bows to the prepared." It doesn't just visit the brave. It surrenders to those who have built the fortress before the storm arrives. You have just been prepared. The silence that follows is the only space where your true self can speak. The choice was never mine to make. It was always yours. Now, the choice is yours.